This is Keep On Cooking, a podcast for people who love cookbooks and want to know more about the authors. It's also a great place to get a weekly dose of culinary inspiration to keep things pumping in the kitchen. So grab a cookbook and keep on cooking. I'm Dustin Harder, and this is Keep On Cooking. Hello and welcome to Keep On Cooking, the only podcast dedicated to plant-based cookbooks. I'm your host, Dustin Harder, and this guy over here just loves it when I try to hide mushrooms in our meals. It's my husband and podcasting partner in crime, David Rositi. How are you, dear?
I'm good.
Good.
And I do love when you try to sneak mushrooms into things.
It's your favorite thing in the world.
And I ask you about it and you don't look me in the eyes. I know that's when you're lying. I'm like, are there mushrooms in this? And you're like, no.
And then I usually try to not say anything, but then you start finding them and you start, I will look over at your plate and you will have, like, within a matter of 30 seconds magically picked out like all of the mushrooms.
Correct.
And I thought I will have hidden them well.
Correct.
I think you just need to embrace the mushroom.
I try to. The shiitake bacon, I will definitely like chow down.
Holy shiitake.
Holy shiitake. But any other mushroom I really cannot do.
Oh, well, you know, I'll keep trying.
I know you will.
Babe, I just want to say that I'm so happy you're here and you're by my side.
Thanks, babe.
I just had to do, I recorded a couple solo episodes in a row and I needed you to pronounce a couple of words.
Oh, great. Oh, no. Can't wait to hear.
But also, I just love having you by my side for this, and I appreciate you so much.
I love you too,
so
babe.
thank you.
Proud of you.
Oh, love. Well, listen,
Look
we've
at
got
us.
another amazing guest. It's superstar. We got a
Superstar.
legend.
She's got 3 names. She's so much a
She's
superstar.
that much. That's how big of a superstar she is. She's a legend in the vegan world. We have the joyful vegan herself, Colleen Patrick-Goudreau, on the podcast. She has many cookbooks and lifestyle books, but she's here to talk about the new edition of her 2011 classic, the re-release, the 30-day vegan challenge, the ultimate guide to eating healthfully and living compassionately.
Love it. Colleen is an award-winning author of 7 books, Seven, including the best-selling The Joy of Vegan Baking, Color Me Vegan. That's a great title, Color Me Vegan, and Vegan's Daily Companion. She's an acclaimed speaker and a multimedia host on cooking shows and her inspiring podcast, Food for Thought. She also has another podcast called Animology. Colleen is a regular contributor to National Public Radio and has appeared on the Food Network, PBS, and has appeared has stuff featured in Huffington Post, Epicurious, and Oprah.com.
Yes, she does. All the good stuff. Her latest book, The Joyful Vegan, Staying Vegan in a World That Wants You to Eat Meat, Dairy, and Eggs, has received rave reviews. She's been dubbed the Vegan Martha Stewart by VegNews magazine. And I got to tell you, she was an absolute delight to speak to. Listen,
great.
I've known of Colleen for years, and I'll be transparent. When I say I would look her up, on Instagram or wherever, and I always sort of felt her energy was like a little aggressive for me. But in researching this book more and then chatting with her, I kind of fell in love with that energy.
That's great.
Yeah. And she said it best when she started the interview. She just plain out said to me, I'm just a woman with an opinion. And it inspired me actually a little more.
Yeah.
Like, she was like, I have an opinion and I'm not afraid to share it. And I've got things to say. And then I I felt a little like it was disarming to me. And I kind of just fell in love with her then. I just think she's great. And it sort of changed my whole perspective. So I think she's really brilliant. I love the energy and the approach in helping people. So I learned a lot about myself in getting to know Colleen as well. So yeah, it was great. And I'm honored, absolutely honored. She's a busy woman. I'm so honored she took the time to chat with me. And here she is. So you can get in on that good energy too. Please welcome to the pod, the lovely, the inspiring, the joyful Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. She is an acclaimed speaker, cultural commentator, author, and multimedia host. Please welcome to the Keep On Cooking podcast, the legend that is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. thank you for being here.
Oh, that is amazing. Thank you. That just means I'm very opinionated. I have a lot of opinions. That's what all that means.
It's great to have an opinion, so we welcome it. Fantastic. Well, we're going to dive in with your icebreaker question right away, a non-food related one. Well, depending on your answer, actually. What's a book you've owned for some time that you really want to read, but you haven't gotten around to it yet?
Ooh, good question. I was actually looking at my bookshelf. We have many bookshelves. I was looking at one of my bookshelves. It's gosh, what is it called? It's one of the Churchill biographies. It's the
Okay.
is it The Last Lion? I think it's called. I recently read a Churchill biography like about a year ago. So I looked at that book and I went, oh yeah, I gotta read that. And then I went, hey, I just read the biography, so maybe I'll wait. But that's still on the shelf. I need to read it.
Give yourself a little space and time between, but I guess you're saying the space and time has passed. It's time to pick it up, maybe.
No, there's other biographies. I do love biographies. So
I do too. Do you remember the first biography you ever read?
Oh my God. I actually think, and I'm not just saying this, I really think the first biography I read as an adult was about Diane Fossey.
Okay.
Gorilla. So it was called Woman in the Mist. And it was after I would have read Gorillas in the Mist, which was her book about her experience. But Woman in the Mist was it Farley Moat was his biography of Diane Fossey.
Yeah, I love biographies too. My first one was Gilda Radner from Saturday Night Live, actually.
Oh,
yeah. Very, very sweet, sweet biography. And then the book that I haven't read that's been sitting on my shelf is called Just Sit, a meditation guidebook for people who know they should but shouldn't. And I will admit that I meditate a little, and I got it to sort of push myself in a little further. And I'm like, well, I need to just sit with this book and actually take it in and read it. So that's on my goal list for my library that's collecting dust over there. Well, you've been in the game, the vegan game, for almost 25 years, and I'm so honored to have you on to chat about one of your many outstanding books. We have the 30-day, let me line it up there on the screen, the 30-day vegan challenge, over 100 delicious, nutritious, plant-based recipes and meal ideas for eating healthfully and compassionately. One of the 7, I might add, with another one on the way. And I have to say, I've used a couple of your books in my personal journey over the years. So sitting with me here, I've also got the vegan table. And if you look here, we got some Post-it notes lined up there, which I always love seeing on my books. And of course, the fabulous, the joy of vegan baking here. So these have been on my kitchen shelves and also getting put to use in the kitchen for years. But before we dive into the 30-day vegan challenge, can you tell our listeners how it all began for you? You have such a strong following and a community you've created. When did veganism kick into play for you, and when did it become clear that it was your path to help inspire people and lift others up on their own journey?
It's funny. When I think about if I knew anybody who was vegan before I was vegan, I think there was one person. I worked in a health food store and I was vegetarian at the time. And this was back in New Jersey, in Summit, New Jersey. It was
nice.
Yeah. And I remember my coworker I think he was vegan. And I remember having dinner with him, and I remember doing the whole, like, I would be vegan if, I would be vegan but, and I remember saying things about, free range eggs and, organic milk or whatever I was saying.
Sure.
Right? I'm happy to remember that. And even if I didn't remember that exact instance, I really do make an effort. And it's one of the things I really emphasize in my work for other people who, look to me for advocacy tips, is I really, really think it's important to remember our story, because I have to remember that I was one of those people who did that. So easy, right? To be like,
truly,
oh, why can't just people do it? And their excuses, I'm tired of them, right? Which is true. And I was one of those people. So it's humbling and good to remember. So I was vegetarian first, pescatarian, vegetarian, and then I moved to California. And it's not a prerequisite that you become vegan when you move to California. But I was working for like a .com. Even this is back in 1998.
Early .com days.
It was a website called web.com.
Wow.
Because the owner, his initials were WEB, and he got that domain long ago.
Wow.
And so when it was becoming a thing, he was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, it seems like I should be able to do something with this. So a directory was created of the web, and I was a writer. I was basically writing reviews of websites. So this was very early on in the internet, and I was writing reviews. I know, like early.com thing. So I was doing that just like from home because I had just worked, I moved to California, and I was sent down to LA for some kind of like .com tech conference.
Yes.
I didn't know anything about tech. I didn't know anything. I have a master's in English literature. I wanted to read Shakespeare, but I was writing these reviews. And so I was like, oh, cool. I'll go down to LA and I'll go to these, workshops, whatever they were. And I was reading a book at the time I brought down to LA with me called Slaughterhouse. Light reading.
Light read. Just a simple beach read.
Exactly. That's my beach read.
Right.
And so I was reading this book, and it was by Gail Eisenitz, who's an investigative journalist. And she was writing this book about a whistleblower at the USDA who had identified the fact that they're just, the lines were too fast, and it was not okay for the workers. It wasn't okay for the animals. And so he was a whistleblower, and, didn't go over well for him. So she stepped in to write this story and didn't want to be accused of this slaughterhouse being one bad apple. So she decided to go and talk to slaughterhouse workers across the country, the US, and ask the same questions to each of the to the workers in these different slaughterhouses, of which there are not many now because they're all consolidated. So, a lot of massive ones as opposed to a lot of small ones. So I was reading this book, and it was absolutely devastating. And I had no intention of becoming vegan. I didn't this wasn't on the journey to become vegan, but it was in the reading of this book, and it was the awareness. I mean, all I have to do is think about the descriptions of this book. I don't even have to ever read it again. Right.
Yeah.
And it was in the reading of this where I became aware that the difference between when I became vegetarian and when I became vegan. When I became vegetarian from Diet for New America, John Robbins' book, it was the way the animals were treated. I couldn't stomach it. I didn't know. I had no idea about factory farming, industrialized farming. Slaughterhouse was that we bring them into this world only to take them out of it.
Yeah.
And in the process, we create a culture of violence. And that's what slaughterhouses, that's what it became for me, aware that I was paying people to be completely desensitized to their own compassion, to the animal suffering. And the thing that was so striking, and I'm not going to give details, so don't worry, anybody who's listening, I'm not about to say horrific details. All I have to do is allude to them for you to, kind of want to. And so what it was for me wasn't the slaughter itself. It was the torture inflicted upon the animals because no one else was watching, because there wasn't accountability, because they were desensitized, because this was a culture of violence. And so I was weeping, sobbing, crying. I'm like, why am I going to these workshops? And what are these stupid conferences? I'm like, this is this is everything here. What is this? None of what's going on here at this conference is meaningful. And I called my husband. I think I was there 2 nights. And I called my husband and I said, I don't even know what this means, but I am vegan. I don't even know how to say it. But I'm vegan. And he's like, okay. And I was crying, And he says, okay, honey, totally, whatever, I support you. And I went home and I was vegan. And David followed suit about 6 months later. But to answer the second part of that question, it was immediate for me, the advocacy part. It stepped everything up. I was already doing advocacy as a vegetarian. I frankly was doing advocacy as a non-vegetarian. I mean, I wanted to do something to help animals. And so I very quickly stepped up my game, and I started labeling. I started doing outreach. I started doing awareness raising. I started doing leafleting. I started showing street TV. We called it street TV then. Now I know there's this whole Anonymous for the Voiceless, but I was on the street with a TV VCR.
Yeah. Wow.
Dating myself. Talked to people on the streets and loved that process. And doing this work and doing it for years, but it started becoming clear to me that the questions people were asking is, well, what do I eat? And where do I shop? And how do I cook? And what about protein? And what about calcium? And what about protein?
All the things. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I started doing the work I do. And it's the work I still do. It's the awareness raising, but it's also the empowering people with the resources they need, not for the why, but for the how.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also not shaming people. You have a great way of empowering people in a very positive way, which I think is so helpful, because I think people get interested. And this is when I got into it around 2009 or so. I remember going to some sort of event or a conference or something, a vegan conference, and people said things to me that were like, oh, well, you still do that? Or, oh, like they were just so negative about the whole process, as opposed to saying, oh, great. Well, what else do you need help with? You know what I mean? It's great you're doing this thing. Now, what else can I help you with? So I was like, I want to shift this. I don't want to be the vegan police. I want to be part of the solution for people. And I feel like that you just have this great way of empowering people with listening to what their needs are, as opposed to telling them what they're not doing, which I think is just a terrible aspect of the vegan community. Some people are like, well, you're not doing this. And it's like, hold on, let's focus on what they are doing, and I love that about you. That's great. And you mentioned cooking. So I'm curious about you. This is a cooking podcast after all. Were you well versed in cooking before you went vegan, or when you went vegan, is that when you sort of were like, okay, I must learn the ins and outs of the kitchen now, or were you kind of already in that direction?
No, I had only ever enjoyed cooking just on my own, and I was still young. I think I was still young. I mean, by then I was in my, late 20s, but in my early 20s even, and okay, I'll tell you the secret. It's not a secret, I think I've said this before, but when I was little, in our basement, we had, kind of a finished basement, and there was a playroom my sister and I had, and my poor mother, I created a supermarket, a grocery store. So my mother would keep all of the boxes of like cereal boxes.
Oh, I love it.
Packaging, right? Now I aspire to be zero waste. This wouldn't work for me as a child.
Sure.
I'd have like bins where you could get
right, exactly, reusable. Yeah.
Right. But I had a little grocery store, and I had a little shopping cart. I'd have my mom come down and shop and like pick the things.
Cute.
I have a little cash register. So I have always loved the process of kind of food and choosing food, and I have always loved cooking for people, and that being an expression of love and nurturing. So I've always loved the ritual of food, and I've always loved the ritual of entertaining, and the movement of, going from an appetizer to a main dish and a soup, like creating the whole menu. So I always loved that, but I never had any inclination to get into food as a career ever. I went to literally grad school thinking I was going to go on and teach at university, to teach English and literature, and Shakespeare. And so I never had an inclination, but when I was hearing back from people, the feedback I was getting was, what do I cook? I went, okay. As an advocate, as just someone who wanted to always provide the resources, I thought, okay, I got to teach cooking classes.
Yeah.
Like, it's the obvious thing I have to do, obviously. Oh. And so I wasn't classically trained. I wasn't, I didn't go start reading books. I knew enough to feel confident. I was scared to death my first cooking class.
Sure.
I knew enough. I knew a little bit more than the people coming, or at least I knew that I had things to share, right? Again, an opinion, and I had things to share. So that's how it happened. It was absolutely as an extension of my advocacy, and it continues to be.
I love that. And when you think of cooking and going vegan, when you were starting to explore it all, is there a vegan cookbook for you that stands out in the beginning? One that you went to the most, that you recall was like your tried and true?
Yeah, it was The Peaceful Palate by Jennifer Raymond. I don't know if you know that book.
I haven't heard of it, but I'm going to look it up. It's a cookbook podcast. So every time I ask this question with every guest, and I get so excited when it's one I haven't heard of, actually.
Well, and actually, Dustin, I think she actually taught or worked for PCRM.
Okay, amazing.
Very early on. This is a memory that I have, I'm pretty sure. And so her book was just really good, simple, basic, familiar ingredients, and just, and I loved also, because I've done this from the beginning of my work, I loved that she didn't call her chocolate cake wasn't vegan chocolate cake, it was chocolate cake.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Her lentil soup wasn't vegan lentil soup, it was lentil soup, right? Just normalizing the planet forward aspect of the food. It's just food.
And it's delicious.
And it's delicious, and it's familiar.
Yeah.
And I already ate that stuff before I became, vegan. Yeah, I had to learn some things in terms of eggless baking, because I grew up baking with eggs, right? but that's what being alive is. You learn new things and you
Exactly.
try new things.
Exactly.
So it was definitely that one. And I know a lot of friends in my early days of veganism really liked some other ones. They were just too hippy dippy for me. They were a little too nutritional yeast, a little too much, something. But Peaceful Palate was my first, real inspiration.
I love that. I'll have to look it up. I'm excited to look it up. I love it when someone says one I haven't heard of. I'm like, yes, I'm going to put it on the list. That's great. Well, let's get into it. The 30-day vegan challenge. Over 100 delicious, nutritious, plant-based recipes and meal ideas for eating healthfully and compassionately, the ultimate guide and cookbook. Now, you start chapter 1 off with the key ingredient, I think, for this entire book. We've already spoken about it, but it's called Welcome to Positive Change. You touch on things to expect from nutrient consumption, disease prevention, and even reversal in some cases, physical changes, ethical congruency. You say something powerful about the transition process of going from non-vegan to vegan. You say it's a matter of undoing old habits and creating new ones. It sounds simple enough, but I say powerful to me because habits are really at the core of creating lasting change. So I love that you pinpoint this right up front. Can you speak a little about what might be the key to success when undoing old habits and creating new ones?
It is everything. It's one of the reasons I talk about how being vegan is effortless for me, but becoming vegan is very difficult for a lot of people. And that's a distinction I make as an advocate. And I wish more vegan and animal advocates would make it, because it is just not helpful if you were on the other side. And forget that we were once on the other side too.
Sure.
If you're on the other side looking in, it looks completely unfamiliar, and it looks completely different, and it looks daunting and overwhelming and all of it. And if we go, no, it's easy. It's just so easy. Being vegan is easy. If we just do that, we are losing the opportunity to really hear what people are saying and to guide them in the thing that is the most difficult thing, because it is difficult for them. And the transition is difficult because, as you said, we are creatures of habit, and change is hard. Habits are hard to break. Habits are ingrained in us, and change is just hard. Now, when you do get on the other side of it, I'll get back to the habits part, but when you do get on the other side, that's what I mean by effortless. Once they are instilled and they replace the old ones, then it really is effortless. You just grab the new habits the way you grabbed the old ones, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the truth of it. But in the transition period, the mistake I think a lot of people make, and this is probably because, I don't know, they're reading someone who just says, do this, do this, do this, or it's easy, is they remove things that were familiar to them, replace them with new things. And that could just mean calories.
Yeah.
Like that could just mean you're now eating less, which is fine. Maybe you needed to. Obviously, we know that if you're eating fewer calories, you may lose some pounds, and some people want to do that. That's a motivation for a lot of people. And naturally speaking, you tend to lose, you definitely lose weight, if you have fewer calories, but you also lose weight if you're eating less fat, because there are more calories in fat than there are in protein and carbohydrates, right? So that can be and is a good thing, or not a bad thing. But what happens is people then go, but now I'm losing weight, or now I'm hungry.
Sure.
And so it's literally a matter of giving people permission. Like, if you're hungry, just eat more.
Eat
right?
more. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Eating are like really healthful, nutrient dense foods.
Yeah.
I mean, that's at least what I'm a proponent of. The question about the transition meats and the plant-based meats, I have no problem with any of them. Whatever is going to help people and enable them. Because what I know the truth to be, and I'm sure you know this too, Dustin, people, even once you make the change to a plant-based diet, your habits continue to change. Like how I eat today as a 25-year-long vegan, right?
Same. I think of even what I was eating like 7-8 years ago, and I'm just like, when I was totally vegan, and I'm like, oh my gosh, so like, it's so much cleaner and healthier just as years pass,
That's right. And that's, I think, also very natural. It's a natural progression. So this conversation of like, we should have people go into the, the more processed foods, just stop it. People, like, they're going to do what they're going to do, especially if these things are familiar to them.
Right.
If people, I always say, it's not that we crave animal fat. It's not that we crave animal flesh. It's not that we crave animal fluids. It's that we crave fat, salt, flavor, texture, and familiarity. And so if you get underneath what people identify as a craving for meat, you go, no. we don't crave meat. We're not obligate carnivores. We're not cats who see, squirrels and we run after the squirrel and think lunch.
Right.
We don't do that, right? But what's underneath, oh, I'm craving meat, is probably you want some fat, you want some salt, you want something familiar. You might just want a thing between two pieces of bread or on
Right.
and you want ketchup and mustard and relish and onions and garlic
Yeah.
and all the things. So that is totally fine. And that's what I really recommend to people is start where you're at, identify what it is that's underneath what you think is meat or dairy or cheese.
Right.
Go underneath it and go, what is it? Is it creaminess? Is it a mouth sensation? Is it a chewiness? Is it a memory of your grandmother because she used to make macaroni and cheese?
Yep. Yep.
So go underneath what you think is the need, what is the knee-jerk reaction and what you think is craving. And then starting where you're at, you're like, you don't have to stop eating spaghetti and meatballs.
Right.
Eat spaghetti and meatballs, but
Totally.
switch meatballs out, right?
Yep.
So start doing those kinds of things. And as you do, not only are you going to start to feel better, you're going to start to now identify the things that will still give you the sensation you're looking for, but not be the animal product that you're trying to get away from.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's all such good advice. Such good advice. And we move into chapter 2 through 7 before you get into the day by day. This sort of gets into the nuts and bolts of the 30-day challenge and the philosophy of it, from defining veganism to why it's a 30-day challenge. What about 30 days? So why 30 days as opposed to 2 weeks or, 3 months or something?
Yeah, it could be any of those things. I do think 2 weeks isn't enough time. 3 months could be it too. The data show that experts in behavior change talk about 30 days, talk about maybe 6 weeks, right? The idea is that you have to do it though.
Yeah.
Right. You can't just do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so disempowering for a lot of people is, especially when it comes to the medical changes they need to make. A lot of people are told to just make small changes. And so they try those small changes. We know they're not enough. And then they go on the medication the doctor told them they had to go on if nothing changes for them substantially. So we have to give it long enough for us to really be able to feel the difference and the change and the benefits, but also to be able to mark them through all of these markers. And 30 days is a really nice number. Now, someone could take their cholesterol in the morning, have breakfast, take it again, and it's going to be different.
Yeah.
Do it at lunch again, do it at dinner again, depending on what you're eating. So you can track this literally day by day. And that's what's so exciting, right? We know that if you get saturated fat and dietary cholesterol out of your blood, that the change in your blood is so immediate. So imagine now breakfast, lunch, and dinner on Monday. Now imagine that on Tuesday. Now imagine that on Wednesday. Now imagine that for 30 days. And you can go to your doctor and you can compare between, 30 days before and 30 days later, and you can see the difference. So sure, can you do that within 2 weeks? Yes, you will see the difference. But
Right.
30 days, I think, is a really nice amount of time, not only to see the health benefits, but then also to change those habits. But you have to do them. You can't, I'm not saying that I'm not someone who doesn't support or agree with slow behavior changes. Like I am in support of that, whatever is going to help. But if you're going to do something like a 30-day challenge, do it.
You have to do it
and commit to it. And you're going to see the effects of it.
It's like anything. It's like with working out, it's consistency. So for 30 days, you can say, I'm going to be consistent with this. Then you're going to see the effects. And then you're likely going to be like, ooh, at least that's sort of the hope at the end of it. You're feeling a certain way. You're feeling positive about it. You also talk about knowing your numbers, visiting your doctor, full laboratory. You just spoke of that panel of blood and urine work and offer optimal numbers for the comparison. And you write about creating intentions and goals, which are so important. You go into depth on that. And I love the 3-day food diary. And in chapter 7, you say to find a buddy. So explain to everyone the benefits of having a buddy when you're on the 30-day challenge.
I do think it's helpful if you have support. And I do think especially in the household. So, that can be really challenging, whoever it is making the change, especially if it's the person, well, it's both. If it's the person who's cooking, it can be challenging because they want to make the changes for themselves. And then they wind up being a short order cook and they're making different dinners for themselves, which stop it.
Yeah.
And if you're not the one cooking, that can also be challenging because now you feel like you're going to be inconveniencing the person who is doing the cooking, right? Mom or whoever it is. And so it's helpful if everybody's kind of on the same page. And we see this. I mean, I know you've seen this. I mean, it's so beautiful. I was just at the Colorado Veg Fest, and just the number of families who came up to me to say, my daughter went vegan, and then I became vegan, and then my husband became vegan, and now her husband's vegan, right? This beautiful thing that happens. We know it happens. And if we can all do it at the same time, it can happen faster, and it can happen, and it can just make it a lot easier. So I do think having a buddy really helps a lot.
Yeah, it's that support system. It's great. And this book is really genius in how digestible it is. It really offers a few pages full of useful information for each day, everybody. So that's what we're getting into after chapters 1 through 7. Each day sort of giving you just some inspiration every day on the common things that you're getting into. You get helpful tips and fun facts about vegan living and eating. On day 1, you talk about a few ingredients or items, or as you say, demystifying plant-based foods like bread, pasta, chocolate, cocoa butter, and yeast. And day 2 is titled Trying New Foods and talks about keeping it familiar with foods you already know. Talked about those cravings and those familiar foods. And while also expanding your horizons and trying new things. There's a great, easy homemade seitan recipe here and a Waldorf salad, putting that seitan to use in place of the chicken. And day 3 talks about stocking a healthful kitchen. So what does a healthful kitchen look like on the 30-day vegan challenge?
I want to just say about the trying new foods. It's so funny to me. And again, we've all heard the excuses. I made them myself. But when people say things like, I don't know, I could never be vegan. It just seemed like it would be just like boring and bland, and it'd be the same things rotating over and over again. And I'm like, we all rotate the same foods over and over again.
Yeah, yeah.
This isn't special for vegans. Like, we all do that. I think there's numbers of like, we rotate the same like 7 or 10 meals in a lifetime, like over and over again. We know that when we go to restaurants, we pick the same things, go to the same restaurants, we get the same menu items, same thing with the grocery store. So this is really what's so exciting, is when you're looking in a different direction, you do see things that you never noticed before. So just be open to that. And it's really fun. And I think everyone will tell you when they do finally open up to this and make this transition, or at least get on the path, is they're eating things they've never tried before. And that's so exciting. So I love that. I love watching. I mean, I didn't grow up eating kale. I didn't grow up.
Right. Me neither. Yeah.
Like at all.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting to have all this variety, way more than when I was not vegan.
It's interesting that you say that about rotating foods, though, because I just watched on your Instagram, I saw a reel recently where it was so awesome because you showed all of these different food clips, probably out to eat places you've been recently, but it said that as vegans, we actually like explore, we have more to explore. Like if we get excited about it, there's so much more really that we can look to, because we're not stuck in the same thing that we've been seeing the whole time. So it is something to get excited about.
Oh God, it's so exciting. And if you're at a good restaurant and you have a good, oh my gosh, like the things that people can just do with sauces. I mean, like, it's like, I can,
truly,
and color. So to answer your question about a healthful pantry, so, there's so many ways we sabotage ourselves when we want to eat healthier and we want to make a change. We sabotage ourselves so often. Some of it just has to do with when we buy vegetables, we complain about chopping them because we just have this notion that it's going to take forever. But we've also completely lost sight of how long we should spend in the kitchen. And I really think the barometer is just way too low. I think our measure is just off. And so people think, God, if I have to spend 5 minutes in the kitchen chopping vegetables, that's too much, right? So, stocking a healthful kitchen means actually using the things that you buy and, not treating your refrigerator like a compost bin, because people in there and get super excited, right, about eating healthfully. And then they go, how do I keep the carrots from going bad? And how do I stop the carrots from turning yellow? And my advice is to eat them, because that's the problem, is that you're storing the vegetables as opposed to using it as a temporary, kind of temporary. But the chopping in advance, so chop the vegetables before you put them in the refrigerator. If you are following a recipe and it calls for an onion, you have the cutting board out, you have the knife out, chop 2 onions, right? Doing the things that always get us ahead of ourselves so that we get the excuses. Yes, you can buy the things that are already chopped in advance. You're going to pay more money. You're going to pay for packaging, and you're not going to be as fresh. But if that helps you and that gets the food in your belly, then that's fine too.
Yes.
Know yourself, and then act accordingly. So stocking a healthful kitchen to me is about having the things on hand that are going to enable you to cook things that are familiar and delicious. That's not going to keep you in the kitchen for, an hour, but
Mhm.
maybe 15 minutes, right? And so I just have to say this too, because it's kind of all connected. It's not just about what you have in the kitchen, it's also about deciding what you're going to have before dinner time. Because
Yes.
you're deciding what to have at dinner time, you are already hungry. Maybe your other family members are hankering for some food, and everyone
Mhm.
is impatient and they just want to fill their bellies. And so we'll fill it with the quickest thing as opposed to the most nutrient dense thing.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Decide first. So if you know that you have tomato sauce in the cupboard, and do because that's going to be a really nice quick meal.
Mhm.
Know you have some rice, if you know you have some vegetables already cut up, whatever it is, in the morning decide that, so that you can cut the vegetables up, or you can put the rice in the pressure cooker or what have you, so that when it comes time to eat, you've already thought ahead. So, but we have to have those things on hand in order to make them. Now, again, I have no problem with, I'm going to call them, we all eat processed foods. I don't like this conversation about like processed foods bad and, whole foods good.
Right.
The more whole our foods are, the better. But peanut butter is a processed food if you want to
Right.
get technical,
Right.
because you've
Yep.
processed the whole peanuts into a butter. Nothing
Yes.
wrong with peanut butter. So let's just be mindful that when we talk about processed foods, we're talking about minimally processed and
Mhm.
highly processed, and there's a
Sure.
spectrum. So when I talk about processed foods, even for some people, tofu is more processed than a whole soybean, but
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with tofu, and there's nothing wrong with tempeh once you ferment the soybean with some rice, right?
Right.
So as you get further and further, now even field roast sausage, I love so much. It's basically gluten, which
Mhm.
processed because it's from the
Right.
gluten, but so is bread. And so is there
Exactly.
horribly wrong with bread? I don't think so. Now,
Mhm.
as you get into the place where you're in like TVP and you've pulled out every nutrient and you only have the concentrated protein, okay, now we're in highly, highly processed. Does
Sure.
that mean you should never have it in your diet? No, but it does mean it's displacing more whole foods, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So what is going to be the easiest thing, I don't know about you, but the reason I don't sit around with bags of potato chips in my house is because I don't have bags of potato chips in my house.
That's exactly right.
I would eat them if they were in the
Exactly.
house, because there's no
Same.
because
Same.
it's delicious, right, exactly. And
Yes.
so if you wanna avoid things that don't make you feel good and you're trying to just, change some habits, don't have them in the house. Fill your cupboards with the things that you're going to reach for that are on the more whole side and healthier side that don't make you feel bad.
Yeah, it's that thing of people saying, "Well, I'm going to buy this and keep it on here just for like a little treat or something," And it's like, well, if you have to get a whole box so you can have that one little treat, I guarantee you're going to get into that box sooner than you wanted to. So just don't get it then. That's going to be your solution. You talk about eating healthfully and affordably, which a lot of people complain about Whole Foods plant-based diet and saying, it can be expensive, and it's not. And one of the secrets to this too is actually eating what you buy. If
Right.
you find you're eating what you buy, you're gonna see your wallet not take a hit from it, because you're gonna be like, oh, I'm not buying more food because I'm actually eating the stuff that I'm buying. And you cover some more helpful items at length, like reading the labels and getting to know your grocery store. And let's talk about a big one that I know a lot of people struggle with. You touched on this already, but you talk about making the time to cook. So you really talk about, if it's veggies, or I guess really maybe you gave us the key to it already. It really is what's right for you, right? Like if you need to buy pre-chopped veggies or something like that, like any more thoughts on making the prep easier, right?
I know some people do meal planning, for the week. That's not me. So truly, when I said know yourself, that's partly what I mean. Don't do something
Yeah.
that's not going to fit your personality, and try something. I mean, try something like a meal plan for the week. It doesn't work for me. What works for me is buying smaller quantities of food.
Yeah.
And, I'm in California. We do love going to the farmer's market every week. So we do buy what we need for the week. Often we'll stretch it to 2 weeks. But the point is, I don't I've never shopped at Costco, and I know that it can be, I know I've never been, I know.
I've only been like twice, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I know a lot of people go and I know they love it. And I'm so glad. And I don't understand the idea of buying, like 50 cans of soup.
Massive quantities.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I like I could probably do well with like a small refrigerator because that's how we shop. It's mostly just produce and fruit. I mean, our freezer is literally frozen fruit. That's all, and some vodka in the freezer.
There you go.
But know yourself, know what's going to work for you. So for me, it's buying smaller quantities because food can go bad in my fridge too. And, there's this kind of race against the clock to eat it. And I want to eat it. And I don't like to waste food. I don't want it to go bad. So definitely know yourself. And honestly, I really do believe that our behavior changes aren't even necessarily behavior. They're first, you see in the book, it's challenge your thinking and change your behavior. You have to change the way we think about it. So I mean that literally when I say you deciding what to have for dinner time doesn't even take any effort. If you go, what am I going to have? Oh, I've got some leftovers from yesterday, or, oh, I've got some rice already made and I've got some vegetables chopped up and I know I have some sauce that I can make a stir fry with. I'm going to make a stir fry. You didn't even do anything.
Yep.
You just thought, right?
Yep.
And so some of our blocks are around this kind of phantom fear that we're just going to be locked into the kitchen. And I don't even know what's so bad about that. Put a podcast on. I think I could recommend some podcasts.
Hey.
Exactly. And, or bring a friend in or bring your children in. Like there's nothing, like it's pleasurable also, but if we're thinking about it like it's a chore, that's going to impact our experience. And I would say the final thing is have some good tools, because if you have a glass cutting board and a knife that's not sharp, you're going to lose the sharpness if you are using it. Please stop using a glass cutting board.
Oh my gosh, glass cutting boards. Everybody stop, please. We're begging you.
I don't understand.
I don't either.
I'm also an HSP, so just the idea of the sound, like hitting the knife.
Oh,
the glass. I know. I don't understand. My mother had glass cutting boards, and they were pretty and they were cute. They had a little scene on them, and I
don't get them.
No, I don't understand. So stop with the glass cutting boards.
Yes, yeah.
But get a good cutting board. Get a good one that's a good size, that doesn't shake, that's not super small. I mean, I have several cutting boards. I actually have a cutting board. I mean, we have several. I have my favorites. My husband has his favorites. I have one that I use just for fruit. Nice. I do not want my fruit tasting like onions.
Yeah, or garlic. Yep.
Garlic. So I have my savory and I have my sweet cutting boards. Nice. Have a good knife. Have a honer or a sharpener. And you can get like an electric sharpener. It was like David's favorite. My husband just got this. Yeah. Loves it. That's going to make a difference too if you have the right tools, because if it's not pleasant, if you're not enjoying it, you're also not going to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right. And everybody listening, get yourself a sharp knife too. Get rid of the glass cutting board. Get yourself a sharp knife. It's a game changer. If you think that you won't use it or you don't deserve it, you're wrong. The minute you get a sharp knife, you're going to start using it more. And it's actually safer than a dull knife. So get on it. We're around like day 7 or 8 in here. And there's some great recipes that pop up around in this section. You've got the smoky white bean chowder, lemon artichoke tapenade, herbed lentil soup, chickpea crepes and balsamic mushroom and kale, creamy leek polenta, even a vegetable pot pie with chive and black pepper cobbler crust. Everybody get into it. And a spicy red bell pepper soup. Now, soup is one of my favorite categories because I just love how easy they are to make. And then you can have it on hand and it's very satiating and quick when you want something and just like a quick meal, But I mentioned a couple soups here. Do you have a favorite soup from the book?
Is my garlic and green soup in the book? I think it might be. It's in the vegan table, and it is still a favorite soup of mine. It is so, I love soups too. I love soups too. Yeah, just a really simple stock. The stock is either, you can just use water, but I make my own stock, and it's very easy, people. So don't be afraid of that. You can use bouillon cubes as well, but it's just a basic stock. The rest of the flavor is from a head of garlic.
Okay.
And so it's just 1 onion, head of garlic, and you just saute that up, and then you put in your stock, and then you put in your potatoes, carrots, and kale. Delicious. And at the very end, the secret, once it's all done and you're about to serve it, a splash of vinegar, of rice vinegar. It just all the flavor. So yeah, the garlic and green soup is definitely a favorite, but any soup, I love soups.
Me too. Me too. And that splash of vinegar for everybody listening, that's a great little tip. Any soup you're making, a little splash of vinegar at the end really takes it home. And we keep onward with the challenge here. You offer up a bevy of breakfast ideas for day 8. And there's an apple breakfast cake in here. I'll take cake anytime I can get it. So for breakfast, that's great. We've got tofu, mushroom, and sausage scramble, baked oatmeal with blueberries and bananas, lemon, poppy seed muffins, carrot, ginger, apple juice. So good. And you really touch on everything. You have a day dedicated to talking about how easy eating out can actually be. And I know this is an area that those new to veganism often they either don't plan for it or they have a lot of anxiety around eating out. What's some advice you have for someone who's on the 30-day challenge who's going out to eat?
So what's the title of that chapter there? It's not just eating out, is it?
Yeah.
It's eating out and speaking up. No, I didn't mean to put you on the list.
Yeah, that's okay. I've got it here. I can always flip through it. I'm happy to.
It's eating out and speaking up. And so my advice is not necessarily about the practical aspects and how to read a menu. You know, we can talk about that. It's about asking for what you want. It's about not being self-effacing. It's about not being apologetic. It's about doing it respectfully and kindly. But the way we convey our veganism or wherever we are on that spectrum is how it will be received. So if we're at a restaurant and a waiter comes over and we're like, oh God, I don't want everyone else to hear me say this and I have to ask these questions and I'm going to be such a pain and a PIA and hi, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. I'll just give me iceberg. Well, you've done nothing to, inspire anybody else to stand up and speak for what they want. Yeah. And there's going to be some eye rolls because the waiter, okay, I don't know, fine. What do you want? Just say, hi, I'm vegan. And it looks like you guys have an awesome dish here. And I'm wondering, could you just remove the animal product from that? Can you remove the cheese? Could you replace it with some nuts or what? Right. And they go, oh, I never thought about that. Absolutely. Oh, by the way, I'm vegan too. Or by the way, I'm trying to be vegan. Mm-hmm. We just play small and people around us also, we also just underestimate that people are watching. And when I say that, someone who can identify with playing small will say, no, it's because people are watching that I don't want to make a big deal about it. But the way we convey it really impacts the way because people are only thinking about themselves and whether they can do it too.
Yep.
So if you play small and if you're self-effacing, they're going to go, oh, that looks miserable. Mm-hmm. But if you speak up and get what you want, and then your food even is better than everybody else's, and they didn't know they could ask for something off the menu, then they go, hang on, right? And that's the icing on the cake. The main part is that you asked for what you want and you're going to get what you want.
Yes.
Guess what, Dustin? You're paying for that food.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yep. Right. Yes. I tell people too, you never know what the opportunity is. Your server, because it doesn't happen as much now, but I remember back in the day I'd be on the road and I'd start talking about it and they'd be like, oh, so you eat eggs then, right? Like this salad and it has, a little bit of cheese, but that's fine, right? And it's a great opportunity to be like, actually, no, I'm vegan. So that means no eggs, no meat, all the things, right? And actually positively tell them that information because you're helping them out for when they wait on their next vegan who comes in, 2 days from then, and they can go, oh yeah, actually, I just had someone in the other day and they ordered this and they loved it. It's like done. You've now helped all the people to come. You've helped that server. Like you're helping without even knowing it, if you can just say what you want. So I love that advice. I think it's great.
Absolutely. And the thing I would add to that is what you just said. I actually do think it's helpful because there's still so many misconceptions about what vegan means.
Yeah.
And, there's also arguments and people say that's not vegan and this is vegan. Fine. But aside from that, just the basic understanding of what it means, I will tend to say I'm vegan or we're all vegan. So no meat, dairy, or eggs. Yes. Do you know what I mean? Or fish. I'll maybe name the 5 things we don't eat. It's pretty much that's all. But then we eat millions of other things, right?
Yeah.
But the 5 things. So I'll say that to even help the server and just convey it in a way that's there's no mistaking what I'm saying. And this goes for whether I'm in, an English speaking place like the United States, or if I'm traveling, I'll do the same thing. So I'm vegan. Yeah. So know this, know that. So I actually think when you're traveling somewhere, it's actually more helpful to learn the names of the animal products in the language of that country.
Sure. Yeah.
Than just knowing how to say verdure, like vegetables or fruit. Right. Learn how to say no meat, dairy, eggs, and fish, right? That's going to be more helpful because there's not going to be any misunderstanding.
Yes, 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 yes. You have to help them so you can help you, and then you're helping everyone else. So it's a win, 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 win all the way around. And you cover packing lunches for school and work in here with so many great and truly easy ideas to keep you and your lunchbox full. You get into some salads in here. I've got my eye on the lentil salad with beets and citrus vinaigrette. Sounds so good and good for you. You even covering keeping it vegan while traveling with tips on things to avoid and smart planning for travel. You talk about airports, airplanes, car travel, accommodations, and international travel, just like you did with that great advice. And I feel like we could do an entire hour on traveling. So I'm skimming over this a little because I think you and I could go deep into this one. Maybe we will one day talk more about traveling. But I love that you wrap up this section by saying, I've had some of the most memorable meals while traveling, and I've had some that filled only that essential need, filling my belly. And sometimes that's just good enough. And I couldn't agree more. Like sometimes you just got to eat, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be a 5-star meal every time. Like that's not the goal, right? As I'm talking to you about that though, you travel often. Is there, when you say a memorable meal, and I say that to you right now, anything come to mind that you had a memorable meal in travels?
Oh, for sure. And they tend to be in places you wouldn't expect. So
Sure.
certainly in Italy, we do have a lot of special meals in all of Italy,
Yeah.
mostly in Tuscany. But one of our most memorable meals, we still talk about the meal we had at a castle in Scotland in the Highlands. It was part of a trek. We had done a 100-mile trek in the Highlands, and we ended at this castle, and they didn't know anything from vegan, and they made the most, and they actually host an 8-course meal for anybody who comes, who wants to pay
Sure.
in the restaurant. And we gave them some advice and tips and told them we were vegan. And then they went off, good chefs will do this. They went off and did their own research, and
Yeah.
they made the most delicious meal for us. And they surprised themselves. So it's those
Yeah.
kind of surprises that are just really lovely. And that came from asking for what, we wanted.
What you needed, what you wanted. I love that. That just give me like little like butterflies in my, because it's so great when I love when the chefs get into it and then they surprise themselves and they're like, I made this thing and it's delicious. And you're like, I know, now you can serve it to everyone.
Exactly. And I have those conversations, and, the work that I do in the travel, with the trips that I do, that actually is advocacy also, because we are working with chefs who
Yes.
didn't think they could stretch their comfort zones. And the
Yeah.
conversations I have with chefs, and I'm not going to lie, a lot of them are male and have a lot of, machismo, depending on
Yep.
the country we're in. And there's and most chefs are trained toward, animal products, right? That's what they're trained toward that.
Right.
And so having the conversations like we did earlier on here about the fat, the salt, the texture, the familiarity, and the flavor, I love watching the light bulb moments for the chefs who, when they
Yeah.
say, "But how would I do this?" Because again, they're on the outside looking in. I might know, it might be really clear to me, but they go, "But how would I do, even if it's baking, right? How would I do that?" And I go, "Listen, animal, baking isn't about animal products. It's about moisture and leavening and binding. And you can get all of that." And they go, "Oh, I didn't." So when you break it down, right? That's the stuff. Those are the conversations. Those are the light bulb moments that inspire me to this day, every time I have those conversations.
I love it. Well, and there's great stuff that continues to unfold in the days to come in this book, discovering that there is life after dairy-based cheese, where you feature herb cashew cheese, pasta alfredo with walnut parmesan, and then you have this gorgeous looking strawberry bruschetta. Ah, everybody, strawberries, bread, come on. And you cover baking without eggs with recipes like chocolate ginger snaps and cowboy cookies, Mexican chocolate cake, and a decadent tiramisu. And you address calcium at length, plant-based milks. You get into the details of tofu and the different variations of it. Listeners, this book is not just for those seeking a 30-day challenge. So I want to say that here. It really is a comprehensive 101 to being vegan, answering a lot of questions you still might have, even if you've been vegan for some time, including the great protein myth that includes a chart of plant-based items and how much protein is in each, a great resource just to get a quick glance on how protein-rich plant-based foods can be. And now you go on to cover vitamins and minerals like iron, B12, and omega-3s. You mention inadequate absorption as opposed to inadequate intake of vitamins and minerals, which I think is so important. And most people think that they're not going to be able to get their vitamins and minerals from plants. So can you expand on the absorption versus the intake of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this comes when you are eating a variety of plant foods, right? So if you're not eating potato chips all day, which again, I would if I could.
You're not alone.
Oh, God. My husband knows that. When my husband comes home with potato chips, it will be something like salt and vinegar, which I'm always happy about because I hate salt and vinegar potato chips.
You're like, that's
So,
fine. That's fine. That's fine. Yep.
I can resist. I can resist. So it's not so if you're consuming a variety of whole plant foods, and and some of the foods are going to be supplemented that you're eating as well, right? Some dairy, non-dairy milks you're getting, they're going to have also fortification of some things too. But the point is, if you are consuming a variety of foods, you are not only taking in the vitamins, but you're also absorbing them. So there's a lot of these, when we talk, I wish we would talk more about complementary vitamins, and right, because we heard so much about the complementary protein. Put it to rest. Put it to bed. Don't worry about complementing your proteins. It was Frances Moore Lepay who actually started that whole myth. She didn't mean to, and to this day she will say, if you want to complement your proteins, just say something nice about them. To bed. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
But complementing our vitamins, yes, and that's going to come from eating variety, and it's going to come from a variety of colorful foods too, which you're only going to get if you're eating plant foods. So, for instance, vitamin C will help the absorption of iron-rich foods. So iron-rich foods, really important. Your green leafies, for a gazillion reasons, the green leafies, right? But if you're consuming those green leafies with vitamin C rich foods, and that's not just the oranges and citrus, but it's tomatoes, it's strawberries, it's vitamin rich foods, persimmons, so get those into your salad, or whatever it is you're eating those greens in, and add some vitamin C. Same thing with something like calcium. Our calcium is absorbed when we have vitamin D. Now, vitamin D obviously is more, accessible from the sun, and we need to be mindful of that because depending on your skin color and depending on where you live, and if you even want to expose yourself to the sun, that can be tricky. So there are some things that I talk about supplementing, and I actually prefer talking about it as complementing rather than supplementing. To me, supplement sounds like a substitute, and we shouldn't be substituting all of these wonderful, natural vitamins and minerals. But complementing them, we can, because, for instance, vitamin D, right? So I do take a supplement that is actually called Complement. It's by our friends at Meat Free Athlete, and they make the most wonderful vitamin because it's not all the stuff we don't need. I don't need a multivitamin that has vitamin C. It's a waste. It's a waste of money. It's just a waste because I'm getting tons of vitamin C from the fruits and vegetables I'm eating.
Right.
But it's based on the things that might be more difficult. It's the vitamin D, the B12, the omega-3 fatty acids, selenium they have in their vitamin K. So some things that you don't typically get as much as from your food. It's a complement rather than a supplement. So anyway, the point is, I don't even think about it because I eat such a variety of plant foods, but just being mindful of that is just going to help you when you go to get your blood work. And we just got our blood work done. We just had an annual, and oh my gosh, it's pretty gratifying looking at these numbers.
Yeah.
It's really lovely. And I need to actually pull back. My B12 was 1,800%. So which is, there's nothing wrong with that because it's a water soluble vitamin, but you don't need to worry about your B12, right?
But you're getting it.
Definitely getting it. And guess what? The only other thing that was a number that, we're just looking at, I'm not concerned at all, is my iron was high.
Okay.
Not in a way that I'm concerned, but in a way that she doesn't usually see, especially for vegans. And David and I were both at that. And, I'm probably just absorbing a lot of the iron because my hemoglobin, everything was great and perfect. My total cholesterol was 150. These numbers that are empowering, even for me, that's long into it. I want to see that I'm doing the right thing.
Well, I think that's sort of the thing, though. Over time, even when you've been doing it a long time, you're like, you trust it and it, but then you're like, let's make sure. And then you're just so happy to see it. You're like, this is right all this time, So it's definitely gratifying. I love that, and I love that you tackle in this book nutritional needs for specific groups in here. I think often people might use a category they fall under as an excuse or a crutch to stop them from enjoying the benefits of a plant-based diet. You offer up gentle guidance for pregnant and lactating women, infants and children, men and women over 50, competitive athletes, diabetics, allergy prone, and even cats and dogs, with some sweet photos of your pets peppered throughout. And you've got guidance on celebrating the holidays and honoring your values, followed by understanding weight loss, calorie reduction, and calorie expenditure. And on day 29, it's called Compassion Fashion, it's cool to be kind. And I'm so glad this is in here and placed where it is. I was working with a client recently and they're just getting into veganism. And when I started talking about clothes, just this confused look came over their face. It was a surprise. And you talk about leather, feathers, wool, silk, and fur, and all the alternatives available to these items. And on day 29, you tackle the idea of intention, not perfection. And what does this mean for you when you talk to people on day 29 about keeping it in perspective?
Well, the first thing I always say is that my goal is not to be as vegan as I can be. The goal actually isn't even to be vegan. I never set out to be vegan. I never set out to like wear this badge called vegan.
Yeah.
My goal is to not hurt anyone. Like my goal is to eat as healthfully as possible. Those are the goals, right?
Yes.
Veganism is the means to get there. But when we get hung up on the badge, when we get hung up on veganism being the goal, then we get into all of this worry about perfectionism. And so I just want people to keep it in perspective. It's an imperfect world. As long as you are human, you will be imperfect. It is just the nature of us, and that's okay. But the things that we can do, everything you just talked about, just not eating meat, dairy, and eggs, doing our best not to hurt anybody, not wearing them if we can't. If you have some things left over, when you're ready to throw them out, right? But the point is, if your intention is to just be as compassionate as possible and to live as healthfully as possible, then like that's really achievable. But if your benchmark is vegan, then you're just in trouble because you're never, that's when you get into the slippery slope things and like really the detail will like maybe that's not vegan. Then just we shouldn't be here. Like we're never going to be able to solve all of it, right?
Yeah.
But what we can solve is to do the best we can to live as compassionately and healthfully as possible. And that's achievable. And veganism happens to be a really consistent and I'll say effortless again way to achieve the goals of living compassionately and healthfully.
Yes, yes. And I love that you say, and I've seen you say it on social media too, don't do nothing because you can't do everything. Do something, anything. There's just so much power to that. I've seen you say this, and we all have been caught up in the all or nothing sort of approach to things, right? And it's little changes. All the little changes, they add up over time. And sometimes that little something for someone that they keep doing is sort of like a seed that they plant, and it keeps growing. It grows into more and more, so do something, everyone, anything. I love that. And of course, you're branded as a joyful vegan, and 30 Day wraps up this wonderful book with your entry on being a joyful vegan in a non-vegan world. So tell us more. What does it look like to be a joyful vegan in a non-vegan world?
You just reminded me, I didn't realize I wrapped it up like that. And the book that followed the 30 Day Vegan Challenge is The Joyful Vegan.
Nice. Oh, what a perfect follow-up that continuation.
It wasn't lost on me that the Joyful Vegan followed the 30 Day Vegan Challenge, but even that you said I ended it that way. I don't think I made that connection.
Yeah.
So that's lovely. And I wouldn't do this if it didn't feel good. Why would we do this? Why would we, want to be the butt of people's jokes and have, and truly, just the choices we make. Sometimes it's really hard. It would be so much easier to just do the wrong thing. It's so hard sometimes. And I mean that in the sense of of course it's easier when we can just choose convenience, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're literally facing all the time. The packaging and eating out and the quick fast food and the processed food, right? That's so convenient, but sometimes it does, and I'll speak from the place of zero waste, Of course it'd be easier if I just got the damn tofu packaging rather than make my tofu myself, right?
Sure.
It's easier. And I'm not setting out to be perfect even in that way, but the point is, why would I go through this if it didn't feel good? And it feels really darn good to reflect my values in my behavior and to know that I can wake up in the morning. And it is the first thing I do. I do a gratitude list. I am so grateful to have this awareness, to have this opportunity to literally manifest the values I have in my everyday behavior. That's something we all say we want. We all struggle with, how do I live the life I want to live? And how do I, manifest the things I say I care about? Well, try it and it feels pretty darn good. So that's for me what it means to be a joyful vegan. It means, going through this world, trying to be the best person I can be, being compassionate, being grateful, having wonder, being curious. That's what it means to be a joyful vegan. And I get to do that every day. That's pretty cool.
Yes. And I have to say, I'm also a joyful vegan, and I hear you. I'm on board. And that's the book, everybody. But I have to ask you here, I ask everyone, what's your book brag? Something you're most proud of when it comes to this book?
The 30-Day Vegan Challenge?
Yeah.
I am so proud that I've heard from so many thousands of people who've used it as part of their journey. I mean, it's the same thing with my recipes, Justin. Like, I am so proud when you show me those tabs, that's really meaningful for me. There's nothing I do that's for the sake of doing it. It's because I literally want you to have this thing I give you.
Yes.
I wanted to bring value to your life so that people actually read it, use it, make those recipes. I mean, that's such a gift. It's such a gift. So if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. That's a great book brag. I had a feeling it would be along those lines, because this book has so much power to help so many people in such a positive way. And everybody, that is the 30-Day Vegan Challenge. And now I've got your rapid fire questions. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Number 1, pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Favorite pasta shape?
A vermicelli.
Ooh, if you could be an animal, what would you be and why?
Oh.
I know that one's a hard rapid fire, but I'm curious.
Like, do I want to be the animal or be with the animal?
Right.
What animal could I be? Oh, probably. Oh, gosh. I'm torn between a goat and an owl.
Ooh, you can be both. Different times you can be both. I'll take both because I like that they're so different. That's great.
Very different.
Well, what do we have now? Do you collect anything? Rescue animals excluded.
Yes. What do I feel like there's something I do. I mean, I don't like things, but I feel like there's something. I mean, teapot. I have pretty teapots. Like,
Ooh, I like that. Okay. Have you ever seen a double rainbow?
Yes.
Favorite quick food item to make when you need a meal fast?
Polenta.
Underrated, and I always forget about it. Every time I make it, I love it. So it's a good one. Barbecue sauce or hot sauce?
Barbecue sauce.
Favorite flavor of ice cream?
Chocolate.
Favorite ingredients for a salad?
Kale, carrots, fennel, avocado, tofu.
Aren't you on here? I mean, just this big bowl of kale right on the cover of the book. We got you caught in action there with the kale. So that checks. This tracks, actually. The answer tracks. What dish did you make last?
Oh, I just made a tofu salad for lunch.
Nice. If you could pick up a certain skill instantly, what would it be?
Learning a new language. Like,
do you know any other ones?
I'm learning Italian and yeah, so I'm working. But gosh, wouldn't it be great if I could just like put a hat on and language
and just start talking to people all over the world? Oh, it'd be so lovely. I hear you. Favorite spice to cook with?
Chipotle, chili pepper.
Chipotle.
Okay.
Likes it spicy. And your last one, favorite food item to have on hand for a quick snack when traveling?
Bananas.
Oh, very good. Will you eat them? Will you eat them when they're all bruised and everything? She's a zero waste gal, so she's getting into that banana. I got to use that for baking or something. If I see it get a spot on it, I'm like, I got to make that into bread or something.
No, I make a lot of smoothies, and so I also buy bananas.
I'll freeze them.
I freeze them all the time, but I don't want any green on my banana. I don't even want any yellow. I want just a lot of brown.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, you did it. That's your rapid fire. Well done. And of course, listeners, you can get more of Colleen on her popular podcast, Food for Thought. Get a little food for thought everywhere you listen to podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and tune into that. And Colleen, please tell everyone where they can find you on social media and the internet.
So joyfulvegan.com is my website. And on Instagram, it's @joyfulvegan. Facebook, it's like my name, which is harder to remember and spell, but
all right. But if we're looking up the name or Joyful Vegan, we're going to find you. And everyone, you can get your copy of the 30-Day Vegan Challenge, over 100 delicious, nutritious, plant-based recipes on meal ideas for eating healthfully and compassionately everywhere books are sold. This will make the perfect gift for someone in your life who's curious about a vegan lifestyle, and definitely a great buy for someone who wants to take the plunge but doesn't know where to start. But also, I have to say, if you've been vegan for a while and want a reference book really on how to navigate some common topics or situations you've been running into, this is a fantastic book for that as well. Colleen, you have some exciting news. You're working on a new book, A Year in Compassion, 52 Weeks of Living Zero Waste, Plant-Based, and Cruelty-Free. Can you tell our listeners about that real quick?
Yeah, I'm just excited about it. I originally wanted it to be Daily Dose of Compassion, but it made more sense for different reasons that we do A Year of Compassion. So it's 52 weeks, which I actually like, because kind of what I was saying before, it's not like every day or week you're doing something. It's an orientation to the world to live as, zero waste, plant-based, cruelty-free as possible. So you have a week to really ponder it and think about it and implement it and practice it. And so I actually really like the weekly format. And that's what it is. It's empowering, inspiring, and hopefully will be another book that's valuable for people.
Oh, I know it will be. The 30-day challenge is super valuable. So giving us more than 30 days, I mean, people will be living for it and living better because of it. So that's fantastic. Colleen, you've been an absolute pleasure. I adore you. Thank you for being on the podcast to talk about this fabulous book. It was great to get to know you more. Thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you. You're so generous. Thank you.
This has been a Muzzy Cat production.